My name is Kate Cochran. I am CEO of Upaya Social Ventures, and I am so lucky to be up here with Sachi Shenoy, the co-founder and Chief Impact Officer. And the Chief Impact part is really key today, because today is really Sachi's show. She is going to walk us through research she has been doing about how our model in particular works, how it affects the job holders we are trying to help move out of extreme poverty. So before I turn things over to her, I just want to set some context. So as I mentioned, many people find international development and global poverty an overwhelming and scary problem to try and tackle. And sometimes we find that organizations who are working in this area in their communications oversimplify. And they basically say, yes, we know this is so big and so scary, but trust us, we'll figure it out. You don't need to worry about any of this stuff. We sometimes call that the black box of philanthropy. Today we think of this as, we're going to open up our black box. We're very committed to transparency. We think we've learned a lot of good things that are inspiring. We've also learned some things that don't work. We're going to share all of that with you. We're going to talk for 40-ish minutes. And if you recall, we invited you to be here for 90 minutes. That leaves us a good time to ask questions, have observations, really engage in conversation afterwards. So I will ask if you can hold your questions, please do to the end. We did this yesterday in Seattle, and because we happen to have some old friends who are a little more obstreperous than I think you are, they just jumped in. So that'd be fine too. But I think it'd be great if we can get through what we've learned and then we can talk about it. So with that, we'll turn things over to Sachi.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. And thanks again, everyone, for being here. So if there's one thing that we would all like you to leave with today, after this half hour, it is to be very skeptical of anyone that says that they have the antidote for poverty, that they have the silver bullet. Because we've been working in this space for a long time. Myself, I've been in this space for about 15 years. And the bad news is there is no one perfect solution. Poverty is messy. It is a multi-dimensional beast, which is why it's persisted for centuries, right? But the good news is that over the last 30 years, especially, we've made remarkable progress. These are numbers from the experts, the World Bank, and as you can see, we have cut extreme poverty by over 60%. And that's happened through a number of different interventions. And so this, to me, is what gets me out of bed every morning, knowing that we have made great progress, but there, of course, is still much to do. So with that kind of trend, you may be asking, okay, so what has worked? And what should we keep doing more of in the next 30 years to really conquer poverty once and for all? And so I just want to take you through some of the context for how Upaya came to be in the midst of everything that is going on in our world, in the world of philanthropy, in the world of poverty alleviation, and talk about the niche that we occupy. So, as Kate alluded to earlier, I think, if we can go to the next slide, sorry. We're all familiar with the heartbreaking images that we see. And we're all very familiar, obviously, with relief and aid organizations. And there are some, I think, of our peers in the industry that would criticize aid. And I think criticizing aid has kind of been fashionable as of late. We don't do that. We think there is definitely a place and a time for aid, especially in the wake of a disaster, say an earthquake, health incidents. So obviously we need support to help those that have been injured or displaced. And for a long time, aid was the only solution for poverty. But I think all of us know and agree that it's better as a short-term solution. It's good as a Band-Aid, but it is not the long-term solution. Many of you may have also heard of the miracle of microfinance that has really captured the attentions of people all over the world, especially in the last 20 years. Now, Kate and I actually met 15 years ago at an organization that promoted microfinance, and so this is something we're very familiar with. And I also worked on the ground in India with a large microfinance institution. And I will say that microfinance has been a phenomenal movement. We estimate that it has lifted about 150 million people all over the world out of poverty. And for those of you that might not be as familiar with microfinance, and of course I'm really boiling this down, this might be too simplistic, but it is the practice of giving folks small loans and other micro financial services, and it really promotes entrepreneurship among the poor. So you give a poor person a loan of $100, they can set up a sole proprietorship or a very small business that then they can support themselves and their families. But not every poor person is an entrepreneur. Just like not all of us are entrepreneurs. Most of us want a job. We want a stable and dignified job that we know is going to be there. It's jobs that really help us pay the bills, send our children to school, help us buy our homes. So why should that be any different for the poor, right? So this is really why Upaya does what it does. This is the third leg of that stool that we felt just wasn't being addressed, and not being addressed at scale for the extreme poor. So speaking of extreme poverty, as you may remember from that graph, we have about 736 million people, the World Bank estimates, that are living in extreme poverty. And we hear this word all the time, but I want to open yet another black box and just take you on a journey for about 2 minutes to talk about what life is like in extreme poverty. So this is a photo that I took when I was touring the slums of Bellevue in North India. This is back in 2008. And a lot of these conversations I had really inspired the starting of Upaya. And what I realized after talking to person after person living in this slum was that they had stories very similar to Sita's. And this is Sita here on the right. She was very generous with her time, and she talked about what her day-to-day life was like. So Sita lives in that makeshift house, that little orange tent-like thing you see there. And she talked about waking up every morning, not knowing what she was going to do to earn that day. So imagine you have to wake up every day and find a new job. That takes a lot of effort. That's a huge burden to carry. On good days, she would find a job as a sweeper in near the local hospital grounds. And every day you have to kind of go and ask for permission to sweep the local grounds, and then they would pay you like $1.50 or so for your efforts. On other days, she would get turned away from that job because others would get it. On other days, she would go to construction sites and earn money by hauling bricks over her head and working with other manual laborers, and she'd earn about $1. And of course, on unlucky days, she would find no work at all and go to bed hungry. And it just struck me as I spoke to people like Sita that their income is so volatile. They don't have anything that they can reliably depend on. And so it's no wonder that they cannot feed themselves for that day. They can't meet their basic needs, much less plan for the future, right? And this is really what keeps people stuck in extreme poverty. And at the time, when I looked around, I didn't see other organizations that were really focused on job creation for people like Sita. And that's really what led to the idea behind Upaya 8 years ago. So Upaya creates dignified jobs for the poorest of the poor. We do that by investing in high potential entrepreneurs that have small businesses, that have good ideas, and that are anchored in the most marginalized communities. So to date, we have invested in 16 businesses, and in aggregate, those 16 businesses have created over 13,000 jobs for the board. So I can sit up here all day and talk about why jobs are important for the extreme poor, but I think it's really important for you to hear directly from one of our job holders. And so we have a video that we took of one of my colleagues in India interviewing Jamuna, who you see here, with her son Anand. And just to give you a little context for this video, Jamuna is a job holder at one of our businesses, one of our investees, called Maitri. And Maitri is located in Northeast India, and what they do is they hire primarily women, and they train them to be nannies and cooks, elder care, because there's such a high demand now in India for people to play these jobs, especially in affluent households. And so Jamuna, who was down on her luck, was trained as a nanny and is now working for Maitri, but I'll let her tell you the rest of the story.
मेरा नाम है जमुना थापा और मैं 1 महीने से सहायता में काम कर रही हूँ। ये काम करके अच्छा लग रहा है।
आपके लिए क्यों ये इतना जरूरी क्यों है ये काम?
क्योंकि मेरा बेटा है छोटा, मेरा बेटा को मुझे देखना पड़ता है, इसलिए। मैं दीमापुर में जन्म हुई, कॉलेज शादी होके गई हूँ मैं। सिर्फ 11 और 12 कॉलेज शादी हो गई, मेरा खुद पैसा और माँ का पैसा से। हस्बैंड तो कुछ देने वाला नहीं। वो तो पहले से टॉर्चर करते थे, मारते थे, नशा खा के आते थे। तो किसी के साथ बात मत करो, मैं जहाँ पे काम करती तो वहाँ पे चले जाते। खराब वर्ड्स निकलते थे जिससे कि कोई सुन ना सको। शर्म नहीं तो बोलता था वो, हाँ मुझे शर्म नहीं है बोल के। बर्दाश्त का हद हो गया ना, ऐसा तो मुझे नहीं चाहिए, ऐसा मेरा मन टूट गया ना। इसलिए फिर जितना प्यार करती थी उतना से अभी नफरत है।
आप बहुत ब्रेव है ये सब बताने के लिए, बहुत ब्रेव है।
जितना डरो उतना वो आदमी लोग वो करते हैं, इसलिए हम अपने जो भी करती हूँ। अभी तक तो बुरा काम नहीं की, क्योंकि मैं बुरा लाइन पे नहीं गई हूँ। किसी का चोरी करके नहीं खाई, खुद का कमा के खाई हूँ। पसीना दिन बचत करूँगी, जो महीने का जो सैलरी मिलेगा वो आधा घर पे खर्च करूँगी बच्चा के लिए, जो आधा जो बचत होगा वो बच्चा के LIC के लिए और स्कूल पे दूँगी। उसका फीस वगैरह एडमिशन के लिए आने वाला वो साल में एडमिशन चाहिए, और जो रहेगा वो थोड़ा रहेगा, उसका नाम का कुछ अकाउंट खोल दूँगी। आनंद बड़ा हो के बोले कि मुझे वो नहीं बोले कि माँ ने नहीं देखा बोल के। मेरा कर्तव्य है कि मैं देखूँ कि वो बड़ा अच्छा आदमी हो, वैसा उसका पिताजी जैसा नहीं हो। कि मेरा ख्वाहिश था कि मैं डॉक्टर ज़्यादा पढ़ के डॉक्टर बनूँ, वो तो मैं हो नहीं पाई, और उसे बनाने के लिए वो कोशिश करूँगी।
This job has been a lifeline for Jamuna, and there are 13,000 others like Jamuna in our portfolio, each with their own stories. And obviously, it's such a multi-dimensional thing. You know, the way the jobs have helped them and have helped them overcome difficulties and hardships in their lives and really plan for the future. And it is very important for us not just to count the number of jobs we've helped create through our portfolio companies, but we really want to get a sense and confirm that people are benefiting from these jobs, right? And it's not as easy as, you know, watching people step over a poverty line. I wish it was that easy. And therefore, we have to collect a number of different indicators. And we, even though we're a small organization, we do undertake the time and effort to interview people like Jamuna and administer a 28 question survey. We do this several times a year. And we ask not only about their income and how much it's increased from what they were doing before, which is obviously important, but we also ask about things like savings. Are they able to save? Are they able to purchase assets that they need, like mobile phones or furniture or implements for their house? Are they able to improve the conditions of their housing? And so there's many different indicators, and we look across all of them. And so for the next few slides, we're going to dive into some of this data and talk about what we're seeing that's positive and negative, quite frankly. So the first thing I'll talk about is just income. And we have seen when we calculate households' prior income, all the activities they were doing prior to getting these jobs, they were earning on average 300 rupees a day. And that translates to about $4.25. For an average family of 4, that puts them at or below the extreme poverty line. Thanks to our jobs, they are now earning an average of 600, so they have doubled their income. So they're earning now about 850 a day. And that puts them well above the extreme poverty line. So the other thing, besides just looking at what they are earning and the increase in that, is to also check and see if they feel that this income is more stable and reliable than before. Because as I talked about, one of the key hindrances when you're living in abject poverty is not being able to rely on that income. It's not just the amount you get in hand, right? And so we are really happy that across our portfolio, 87% of people say, yes, the job I have now does feel stable and it feels reliable, and I can at least use that to start planning for the future. 89% legitimately enjoy their jobs, and they would recommend them to others. So neighbors, friends, sometimes if they have adult working children in their homes, we've seen them also bring their children and apply for jobs, which is a great sign. And 44% of them are regularly saving. Those that are regularly saving, and what we mean by that is they're putting away an amount every month into a savings account. For those that are doing that, they're saving on average over $20 a month, which is huge for this population. We look at other facets of their well-being as well. And so, probably not surprisingly, one big priority for most households in India is, if you can afford it, they want to send their children to school. And so we are really heartened to see that over 90% are doing that and are doing that on a regular basis. This next indicator is something that really surprised me. 79% of them have a formal electricity connection. And I don't know if anyone has walked through poor areas in India, but usually what you see is people illegally connecting to the electricity lines and illegally getting electricity into their homes. And the slums are a mess with all these wires everywhere. But 79% of our households can afford a formal electricity connection and actually pay their electricity bills. About 70% of them have their own toilet at home, which is also a big step, so they don't use community or public facilities. And another telltale sign of extreme poverty is when you see people cooking with primarily firewood instead of healthier sources. And so we see households really making that switch when they get enough money in hand. The two indicators that I'd like to see better improvement in is how many are eating 3 square meals a day. Right now that's around 60%. We often see households skipping the midday meal, so we're hoping that that will improve. And only about half actually have a formal bank account. And there's lots of reasons behind that, lack of proper identification and whatnot to open those accounts, but we're hoping to see that go up as well. But not all of our indicators are rosy ones. This is one that we just have not seen improvement in, and in fact we've seen a little bit of backward movement. and we are trying to understand why. So we tracked 115 respondents over the course of about 2 years. And so we administered a baseline survey and we asked them to describe the conditions of their homes. So what are the materials they are using to construct their homes? And if they reported primarily straw and thatch and bamboo, in Hindi we call that kacha, or very insecure housing. And then there's a middle category where it's slightly sturdier, so they're using tin, like metal sheets, but still not great. And we call that semi-paka. And then of course the best kind of housing, which is sturdy, made of bricks and concrete, we call it paka. And so if you look at the baseline, which are the orange bars, we had the majority of people in semi-paka homes and quite a few in kacha homes. But then when we revisited them 2 years later, what we found is that there were some people that upgraded from the insecure to this middle category. But unfortunately, we had people that went from paka homes to semi-paka as well. This was more backward movement than we would have liked to see. Now, one thing is, housing indicators on their own, in my experience, have always been lagging indicators. Often it takes a lot for a family to save up to then make housing improvement a priority. But, and when we dug into this a little bit more, we do know that there are some people that were badly affected by the monsoon flooding that happened last year in India. So some of this is flood-related damage that's caused them to downgrade. And the other component that may explain some of this is that there's a large percentage of migrant workers. So they may be describing the quality of their temporary homes. But we are going back to our entrepreneurs and asking them about these job holders in particular to see what might be going on there. So the last thing I'll say about this section is that we could talk to the owners of the businesses that we've invested in and just get from them a count of how many jobs they had and ask them, okay, how do you think your job holders are feeling? And no doubt it will be 2 thumbs up all the time. So we have made it a priority to go directly to the job holders. Like I said, every year we do a random sampling. And this is a photo we took of this survey exercise happening just a month ago in Bangalore. So this is happening in the garage of one of our businesses in Bangalore. This is the job holder on the left and one of the enumerators we have hired to administer a survey. And now all of our surveys are mobile based. So she's got it on her phone and we get the results almost instantly, which is really cool. So Kate, back over to you.
Great. Thank you. So we've been talking a lot about the job holders and what their lives are like, and that is very intentional. That's the reason that we exist. But we haven't talked yet about how we create these jobs. And there's a reason for that. We don't. We're really very, very clear that we are not the job creators. The entrepreneurs we work with are. But our intervention, what we do is we invest in these companies that we believe have the potential to create jobs. And the kind of work that we do is sometimes called impact investing. And we thought it would be helpful to include in this presentation just a little conversation about what impact investing is and how we define it. Because in a lot of ways, impact investing is another black box. Impact can be defined as carbon capture. It can be defined as job creation. It can be defined as stimulating the economy in an overlooked area. Or it can be as simple as not investing in things that cause harm. And there are many different flavors and honestly many different levels of impact included in impact investing. So we thought the best way to describe how we define impact is by comparing 2 entrepreneurs that we considered for investment last year. Both great entrepreneurs, we're not slamming anybody. The first entrepreneur went through our accelerator. We did an agribusiness accelerator last year, and we had 11 companies participate in it, and one of the companies was really exciting to us. When we saw her application, there were many things about it that looked great. She had a PhD in chemistry. She was a woman entrepreneur, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And she had this super cool technology. What she had found an ability to do, and I realize we have experts in the room on sort of similar agri-technology, is she had shrunk nutrients to nano size where she could embed them into a very small sheet of water-soluble fabric that she sold in these little sachets. And this sachet could be put into gallons and gallons and gallons of water to create fertilizer. And one of the realities of smallholder farmers is the drudgery of the manual labor that they have to do to keep their small plots fertile. And they have to carry pounds of fertilizer, 20-pound bags, 30-pound bags, 40-pound bags. Very, very hard work in the heat. So this particular product had the potential to lower their input costs and reduce their drudgery. And we were really interested in that. And so we invited her to join our accelerator. This is what she projected in her application for her earnings. And I know we have entrepreneurs in the room who are probably saying, wow, that's a great looking chart. It is the proverbial hockey stick growth, just like a Silicon Valley startup. What any investor wants to see is like, wow, could you really pull off these kinds of earnings? And as we got to know her, we thought she could. But there was a problem. The unit cost for her product was so high, we couldn't see a path for her being able to bring that cost down to the point where she could sell it to a very poor farmer and still make a profit. And she was committed to this. I mean, we didn't doubt her sincerity, but we did doubt her business model. You know, if she were to sell to farmers who would still benefit greatly, but were not quite as poor, she would have an amazing business. And honestly, that's what she's doing. We decided to pass on the investment. Other investors flooded in. In fact, she had term sheets before the end of our accelerator, and we wish her well, but that wasn't our kind of impact. So I want to compare that to another entrepreneur, another enterprise, also part of our cohort of companies in the Agribusiness Accelerator last year. This is ZooFresh. ZooFresh is a company based in Odisha, which is a very remote part of India. For anyone who doesn't know the geography of India, very hard to get there, as our team tells us every time they do a site visit. Very, very poor. And because it is so remote, other investors are not going there. ZooFresh's business is selling hygienic, high-quality poultry and fish to local customers in their region who have a hard time accessing high-quality meats there. And the way they cultivate their product is they distribute poultry to village entrepreneurs, like this guy, who is responsible for raising flocks of chicken and then selling back to ZooFresh. This isn't innovative. You know, we see this all around the world, this particular business model, but it's proven. And we could see a path for Ambika here to reach 600 households within 3 years and have a successful business, and successful defined as steady revenue, reasonable profits, and growing her business through the labor of her community. So this company would not attract the same kinds of investors as the first one. Frankly, the profit margins weren't high enough, but we were really excited to invest. And so this was one of 2 investments that we made out of last year's accelerator. And you know, if I pull back a little bit and just talk about our portfolio as a whole and what characterizes them, we're not making grants. This is not philanthropy to these businesses. We are looking for businesses that we believe can become profitable, that they can become profitable enough that over time, another investor will want to either buy out our stake or the promoter will want to buy out our equity investment. But we want to see those profits driven by a business model that relies on labor, so that they aren't looking for a path to cut their costs by cutting out their labor through artificial intelligence or automation or something like that. We also, as Sachi's described, look very closely at these jobs. Are they dignified jobs? Ideally, is there a path for growth in these jobs? We have one company where the entry-level job has led to managerial jobs. And we'd love to see that. It's worth spending just a few seconds talking about what we mean when we say job, too. For most of us, probably, we hear job, we think regular wage-paying job. From Upaya's point of view, we think that's too narrow for what we're trying to accomplish. We recognize that some of these businesses are seasonal. And so these jobs may only be available during the harvest. So what we look at is how long is that seasonal availability? If it's 3 weeks, we're probably not interested. If it's 6 months, that meets our criteria. And it can't be every 6 months the company just sort of grabs a bunch of new people and throws them into the job. We want to see regular relationships with our enterprises. Or we also have some companies that are purchasing waste material, purchasing their raw material from people who live in remote villages who are earning their living by collecting things and selling to this company. Those kinds of suppliers count as our jobs too, again, as long as it is a regular, not a one-off thing. So when we talk about the 13,000 jobs, those are the kinds of definitions that we use. We also check every quarter. That number often goes up, sometimes it goes down. And that's because our companies are reporting to us, look, we had to pull way back because we are having a problem. And we have, I won't assume that anybody here is nerdy enough to watch our website, but we do have a dashboard where we show the results every quarter, and it has gone down a couple of times. Normally we hope to see that it is growing up. All right, let me turn things back over to Sachi.
Thanks. So I will just quickly talk about our accelerator that Kate touched on, and talk about what some of the data from all of these applications is helping us see about where the opportunities are and how that might give us an eye into the future, which is super exciting. So this is a photo taken of our current cohort. This is the 3rd year we are doing this accelerator. And it's a wonderful group of entrepreneurs. I have not met them personally, but Kate has, and she came back so excited from this last trip. Every year, when we open up applications to entrepreneurs, we make it very clear the criteria we are looking for. So they have to be early stage. First and foremost, they have to be creating jobs for the ultra poor, and we define what that is. And we give them an idea of the kinds of sectors we expect to see, things like that. And it's not uncommon for us to get, between 250 to 300 applications every year. And I think that number is only growing because entrepreneurship is really taking off in India. What we do then is we do a first level of screening just to see if they're meeting our basic criteria. And that's when more than half get screened out. And then we invite folks that have made that cut to a round 2. And in the round 2, it's a longer application process. So we get a lot of details from them. Things like their projected revenues, projected jobs over a 5-year horizon, and many other little bits of information. So with the help of some interns this summer, we combed through 160 applications that we have received over the last 3 years. And we are going to be using that data to really now figure out where should we focus our attention on? Where is the greatest potential for jobs? And what are some of the factors we should consider? So one question I wanted to ask of the data is there a difference between male founders and female founders? And as a female founder myself, I am always interested to see how the landscape is maybe evolving and making things, hopefully more, maybe easier, for women to enter this line of work. And we have been very proud that we've always maintained a 50-50 balance. In our active portfolio, half are female founders, which is quite rare for even impact investors. And to be honest, a few years ago, it was really hard to find women-owned businesses. As you can see, in 2017, less than a third of the folks that made it to round 2 were female-founded. But this year, that was almost half. And I think that number is just going to keep going up, which makes me very excited. And, it's not just that we pay lip service to wanting to create a 50-50 balance. We personally think that there are benefits to female-founded companies. So a few other questions we asked of the data is, how do our entrepreneurs do in terms of the angel funding and friends and family funding that they are able to aggregate before they apply to us? And so on average, the companies that apply to us are about 2.5 years old. And so we've kind of controlled for the age of the company. And if you see here, the female founders have raised more on average, and that's signified by the orange bars. So they've been able to fundraise and amass more resources by the time they come into the accelerator. They've also created more jobs on average, which you see in that red bar. And so if you just do some crude math, they are actually creating jobs at a lower cost per job on average than their male counterparts. And this is, again, very crude math. It's really how much have they raised and how many jobs have they created with the funds that they've raised. But we've seen this trend even throughout our portfolio, which is cool. Another dimension that we look at is rural versus urban ventures. And we get asked a lot, okay, do you focus on one or the other? And the answer is our portfolio is quite mixed. And it's probably not surprising that both rural and urban, they start off kind of the same in terms of jobs created in the first 2 years. But then the urban ones really take off, right? Especially in a place like India where you have so much urban density. But does that mean that we should only focus on urban? And the answer is no, because extreme poverty is really the most acute in the rural parts of India. And so even though the rural ventures in our portfolio just have lower job numbers, and that might bring our averages down, we think it's always really healthy for us to maintain that balance. And we wanted to then ask about sectors. So what sectors are our ventures in, and which ones have the most job creating potential? And so as you can see here, this is roughly laid out by the job creation potential. And sectors like skills training, artisan work, logistics, they are creating the highest number of jobs. And this is how many jobs they have reported creating when they apply to our accelerator program. This is not projected. And so these are sectors that we have traditionally focused on. I'd say logistics is new for us. We have a logistics company in our accelerator this year, so we're learning more about that space. And we also have a lot of artisan work, like rural crafts, that kind of thing. Those sectors that are in our current accelerator. And we think that there's a lot of job creation potential there. But I also like to map this against the cost per job. And probably not surprisingly, the ones like in clean tech or in tourism, they're not creating as many jobs, and the ones that they are creating are very expensive to create. So this signals to us that these are probably not where we want to focus, and we want to focus much more on the right side of the graph, which, as I said, we are building a presence in. Now, agriculture here does not look so great, and yet a third of our portfolio is devoted to agribusiness. Not as many jobs and expensive jobs to create. But as I've mentioned, we simply can't escape the fact that the poorest of the poor really do live in the most rural areas, and most of them are involved in some kind of agribusiness work, whether it is as smallholder farmers or as farm laborers. And so we think, again, even though that might pull our averages down, we should always maintain some level of focus in that sector. And lastly, I will just say, we also wanted to see across our sectors what average income increase could be. So now this should be taken with a huge grain of salt, because these are projections by our entrepreneurs as to what kind of wage increase they can affect. But even when we threw out the outliers, we cleaned up the data, and we validated some of their numbers, we do think, again, the sectors on the right are the ones that are going to have the biggest potential to increase incomes. And as you can see, agriculture is also in there. And in our experience, we have seen that if we're investing in the right kind of agribusiness, we can see farmer incomes really shoot up. And that's another reason to maintain some focus there. So I'll just conclude this section quickly by saying, so what does all this data tell us? Well, really continue to encourage female founders to apply, and always try to maintain that 50-50 balance in our portfolio, maintain like a healthy balance between rural and urban ventures, and maybe double down and really raise our own expertise when it comes to sectors such as artisan work, skilling, training, placement, and rural manufacturing and logistics. So that's where we plan to head into the future.